All right, I have to admit it. I was just as grossed out as Ryland. The way that Rocky defecates and eats is so well written by Weir that, like, I was disgusted. Ugh. Hello and welcome back to the couch. We saved you a seat. My name is Luke, and by now you know the deal. We're doing chapters of Project Hail Mary. This is chapter 16. If you want to follow along, there's an Amazon link in the description. Go and buy it. Follow along. We're at 16. We're going on to the end of the book, doing daily chapter reactions. We're just going to get started here. So at the beginning of the chapter, Ryland starts the centrifuge, and they have a quick discussion. The centrifuge mechanism on the Hail Mary, they have a quick discussion about, oh, this is what gravity is like on Earth. And that leads into how much Rocky weighs on his planet, and that things fall at double, gravity is double, a little over double the amount that it is on Earth. So Rocky doesn't just weigh 300 pounds, over 300 pounds like we figured out in the last chapter. He weighs like 800 pounds, which is crazy. Rocky needs to make this workstation, and he begins to work on it, and Ryland says, about how long will this take? Rocky tells him 4 or 5 days, and of course, he doesn't want to make any mistakes, and that's their common culture within Rocky or Arid's world. And Ryland becomes concerned and starts talking to him about how much time do you have before catastrophe happens on Arid, right? Because Earth doesn't have much time. In fact, they have like a year, maybe 2, in terms of how to solve the astrophage problem. And Rocky says they have plenty of time, years, in fact, many, many years. And so Ryland then begins to hypothesize, how is this possible? And it's got to be due to how close Arid is to the sun, and its magnetosphere, and the fact that its atmosphere is so thick and the air pressure is so thick. Rocky gets worked up on this news and lets Ryland know that he will work hard to make sure Ryland can get back to Earth in order to save his planet. Here's the one problem. Ryland hasn't told him yet that it's a one-way trip, right? This is a suicide mission. Rocky states that he can share some fuel with him. So then Ryland perks up, right? Share fuel. What do you mean share fuel? Great. How did you miscalculate? But great, right? Ryland is floored by this news because he thinks he might get to go home. He might get to solve his problem, and through the help of this alien, Rocky, he'll be able to go home using some of the excess fuel astrophage that this alien has. The thing about it is, though, he doesn't know how they miscalculated. Either way, they're overjoyed. But then we go to a flashback. And in the flashback, Strat and her Avengers are waiting on the deck of the Chinese aircraft carrier for the 2 crews to show up and for them to begin their training. And despite the candidates pool being limited, they were able to get 2 full crews. Strat and Ryland then speak about the candidates, and Strat says up front her concerns. One of them mainly, which I think is something that like we wouldn't talk about openly. She's like, I wanted only men. That being that when you have intersex crews, something that's so small, 3 people, there's a concern that there would be some sort of emotional connection created. Of course, she's a little bit more upfront about it, and it's kind of a hilarious scene, but I won't do it justice. And Ryland then starts making fun of her for being bigoted and poking at her a little bit, and their relationship is kind of hilarious. Like I said, he's kind of like the Kirkish humor and the emotional and moral like part of her brain, and she's this like logic driven, and so she's like, she is the captain of this, obviously, but she's more like Spock and he's more like Kirk. It's awesome. It's really, really funny. Then Strat confirms that Ryland will be the one who trains the new science officers. What's hilarious is these 2 science officers, one of them, Annie Shapiro, Annie is a weapon. Ryland talks glowingly about her capacity and her capability for biomechanics and science and all of that kind of stuff, the same field that he's in, or similar field at the very least, and she's incredible at it. Right, she's done it since she was a kid. She's maybe a triple PhD. I'd have to look at it again, but she's incredible. But she didn't even make the main roster. Dubois, this other gentleman, this other PhD, made the main roster. And he made the main roster because he just has experience doing other things rather than being ultra learned. That's headcanon for me. Strat doesn't say all of that specifically, but she does say that he's a little bit more versed in other things and would be a greater asset to the team, she thinks, beyond the point that Earth can intervene. And then Dubois informs Ryland that, in a private conversation, that Ryland also passed the anti-coma gene test, which floors Ryland because he didn't even know. And then we go back to the present. Ryland then is pumped that he might get to go home and actually get to go home and remain, and how resourceful Rocky is and all of that junk. I'm excited thinking about it. And then he thinks Rocky, right? Because Rocky has provided all this information, gonna provide astrophage, and he provides information about the solar system, particularly how to navigate it. Ryland and Rocky then determine that it's the third planet from Tau Ceti that is the planet that they need to go to and they can travel to in order to orbit and collect the sample of astrophage that's traveling in between Tau Ceti and the planet. And it takes about 11 days for the Hail Mary to travel from one point to one point. They calculate. Ryland asks Rocky what he thinks the planet should be called, right? Because Rocky is the one who discovered this planet, since Rocky had been there for so long. And Rocky calls it his mate's name, his companion, his back home companion's name. Even though that Rocky thinks that his back home companion may not be, even though they mate for life, that his back home companion may have moved on because they've been gone for so long. He still calls it his planet's name. So Ryland just says, "Oh, your mate's name is Adrian." Hilarious. Funny. Good job, Weir. You're hilarious. Rocky then tells Ryland that he has to go eat. And Ryland's like, "I want to observe. You eat." But Rocky initially refuses. He's like, "Nah, man, it's gross. You don't want to see this." And then Ryland says, "No, but for science. Like, I want to see it for science." And Rocky heads down to the dormitory. Ryland follows. And he lays out his food and he breaks it up into little bites. Then he pulls a container out of a bag and settles himself over it and then bleeds a little. Right, it's liquid mercury, so it's silver. Ryland can see it. And then he kind of defecates into this container. And then he seals the container. And he, I guess, meanders back over to the food, lays on his back, and shoves the food that he just had into the same hole that the waste came out of. And then the hole comes back together. So it's like a scab ripping open. Defecation, eating, scab closing. And you have to remember, he's covered in a carapace. And so it's a gap in the carapace, then the organic part happens, then the really organic part happens. Then he like scampers over, has his food, eats it meticulously. I wonder how bad or good their digestive system is, to be honest with you. That's why he's so meticulous. And then he does this. What's funny is Ryland asks a question in the middle of this process, and Rocky's like, "You don't get to talk right now," which is hilarious. It's like stage fright, right? Everyone's had stage fright in some form of their life. I know it's kind of funny because like men have these like urinal rules where if a man is standing next to you and another and they're talking to you in the urinal, you're like, "Buddy, this isn't the time for chit chat." So it's similar energy. I kind of feel bad for Rocky. If you had to do that every day, that sounds awful. I like the capability of taste, and I think that would just ruin my entire life. The thought that you put waste out the same place you put nutrient sustenance in. Oh, gross. Then Rocky begins to like pass out, go to sleep, and he goes to Ryland. He says, "Hey Ryland, can you watch me?" And of course Ryland's happy to do it. But the moment that Rocky kind of hits the floor and is just out, because there's no consciousness, Rocky just kind of goes limp. He just boop. Ryland goes back up to his workstation and he writes, "Subject defecates from mouth." Oh, yeah, it's pretty funny. I read that kind of laughing because I was grossed out for sure, but I was thinking about the author, right? Of course, the author is like sitting there laughing, like, "Oh, these readers, I gotta read this gross shit. It's gonna be hilarious." Pun intended. But yeah, I mean, what a funny moment. What a funny moment. Anywho, look, that's the end of the chapter. We're going on to chapter 17. It'll come out tomorrow. Pretty stoked about it. Now let's talk a little predictions. So we're at chapter 16. They're on their way to this planet. This will be the first planet that Ryland visits, as far as I know, which is interesting. And they will begin their study of the astrophage together. I don't know how that's going to go down. I'll say, from what I understand about storytelling, it's going to get worse. Their situation is going to get way, 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 way worse. So, because we're only about halfway done, it can't just solve itself from here. And then we're just puttering around for 14 chapters. So it's going to get worse. I'm expecting some fireworks to happen in the next 2 or 3 chapters. Some really intense moments. That's what happens in The Martian too. Also, not The Martian 2, but Martian also. So I'm excited. But I think that'll be it for me. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and share. And also, go grab the book. Help us out. Buy the book. Buy something else on Amazon through the link. That'll help too. And then you can just follow along. We're having a great time. And I think that's it for me. So until next time, later, taters.